Think about it. We live in a world that's constantly throwing new information at us. Keeping up can feel, well, like a full-time job, can't it?
It really can.
But how many of us were actually taught the art of learning effectively in this whirlwind? It's a skill we often just expect ourselves to have, but maybe haven't truly mastered.
That's such a key point. Yeah. We're so focused on the facts, the figures, the data, that we often overlook the how. And that's precisely what we're diving deep into today.
Yeah.
Something called self-regulated learning, or SRL.
SRL sounds intriguing. So, in a nutshell, what is it all about?
At its heart, it's really about you taking the driver's seat in your own academic journey. It's the process of managing your own learning activities, from setting goals to figuring out the best way to actually achieve them.
Okay. And what's guiding our exploration today? What's the source?
We'll be mining the insights from a really compelling academic paper. It was published back in 1997 in the Educational Psychology Review. And it details a university course specifically built around these principles of self-regulated learning. It's kind of like a blueprint for creating effective learners.
Fantastic. So for you, our listener, our mission today is to extract the most valuable nuggets from this research. We want to arm you with practical strategies you can use, well, maybe immediately, to become a more effective and self-directed learner and really understand why this ability to learn on your own is so crucial in today's fast-paced world. Okay, let's unpack this. What's the fundamental idea behind SRL?
Well, the paper introduces self-regulation as this unifying concept, right? A way to bring together a lot of different pieces of the puzzle when it comes to how we learn complex things.
Okay.
And it leans on a pretty powerful quote from Butler and Wynne back in '95. Theorists seem unanimous. The most effective learners are self-regulating. It's a pretty clear consensus, really.
It is. That's quite a statement. So why is being a self-regulated learner especially vital right now, in this day and age?
Well, just think about how quickly things are changing in our knowledge-driven world. No matter your profession, you're constantly needing to pick up new skills, adapt to new information, learn independently.
Right.
That ability to steer your own learning ship is becoming absolutely essential. In fact, the paper even suggests that lacking these skills can put you at a significant disadvantage in modern society.
That really puts it in perspective. And
Yeah.
the paper touches on a reality that, well, many of us can probably relate to. We weren't necessarily taught how to learn effectively.
Exactly, yeah. Many students navigate their entire academic careers without ever receiving explicit instruction in effective study strategies. They might rely on methods that aren't very efficient. And they can struggle with things like understanding complex texts or adapting when a teacher isn't the best, or even just taking notes that are actually useful later. The paper points to key research here, like Mayer's work on understanding text, Presley and colleagues on navigating less than ideal instruction, and Kira on the power of good note-taking.
So it's not just about knowing what the strategies are, is it? It sounds like it's something deeper.
Precisely. It also involves your personal learning goals,
Yeah.
what you believe about learning itself, and your overall attitude towards it. The paper references the work of Dweck and Leggett, Schammer, and Zimmerman.
Okay.
For instance, if you believe that learning is simply about memorizing and spitting back information, well, you're likely to stick to strategies like just rereading or trying to rehearse facts.
Right, cramming.
Yeah, which often don't lead to true understanding. So the key insight here for you, the listener, is that your underlying beliefs about learning heavily influence how you approach it.
That makes so much sense. I know I've definitely fallen into that trap of just trying to memorize everything before.
We all have, probably. And many learners also struggle with managing their time effectively and what the paper calls volitional strategies, which is really about your ability to stay focused and motivated over the long haul, even when things get tough.
Volitional, like willpower.
Kind of, yeah. It's about persistence and protecting your intentions. The research of Britton and Tesser on time management and Kuhl on volition highlights this important aspect of self-regulation.
Okay, so we have a clearer picture of why SRL is so important and some of the hurdles learners face. What were the specific aims of this university course that was designed around SRL principles?
The paper outlines two primary goals. The first was to directly empower the students taking the course to become more effective self-regulated learners themselves.
Okay, makes sense.
The second, and this is particularly interesting for anyone involved in education, I think, was to equip these students with the knowledge and skills to teach SRL strategies to others. So it was about both personal transformation and the ability to guide future learners.
So they weren't just studying educational psychology as a subject, They were actively learning how to learn and how to teach others to learn. That's a powerful combination.
It really is. And to help students become self-regulated, the course incorporated a number of key elements. Students use questionnaires to really examine their own learning habits, their motivations, their persistence, and their awareness of their own thinking. That's metacognition.
Right. Thinking about thinking.
Exactly. They spend time reflecting on their personal learning preferences and their current study practices. And crucially, they learned when, how, and why to use specific research-backed learning strategies, and they were encouraged to develop concrete plans for personal improvement.
That sounds like a very hands-on, reflective approach to understanding the learning process.
Absolutely. And the authors emphasize the importance of having a coherent psychological perspective on learning. They refer to a recommendation from an APA committee, actually, that simply knowing isolated facts about learning isn't enough.
Right.
You need a framework to connect those ideas and understand how they fit together in practice. Think of it like having all the ingredients for a recipe, but not understanding the steps to actually bake the cake.
That's a great analogy. It's about seeing the bigger picture, connecting the dots.
Exactly. The paper contrasts this with how educational psychology is often taught, where different theories like, behaviorism versus cognitivism are presented separately.
Yeah, in silos.
Right, which can lead to a fragmented understanding, as Rothan pointed out. The authors argue that SRL provides this much-needed coherent perspective, both for organizing your own learning and for understanding how to guide others. So SRL acts as the framework that brings different learning concepts together in a really meaningful way.
So SRL is kind of the thread that weaves together all these different ideas about learning.
In a sense, yes, you could say that. And a critical aspect of becoming self-regulating, as the paper underscores, is personalizing this knowledge. It's not just about reading about effective strategies. It's about actively comparing your own beliefs and approaches to those of successful self-regulated learners. That self-awareness piece is really fundamental.
It sounds like it forces you to take a good hard look in the learning mirror, so to speak.
It really does. And the course made sure students experience the impact of SRL strategies firsthand through actual practice. They introduced a self-change instructional model, drawing on the work of Prochaska and others.
Okay.
This model involves becoming more aware of your current learning habits, learning about alternative, more effective methods, and then really evaluating your own effectiveness as a learner. So it's a cycle: awareness, learning, and self-assessment.
So it's not just theoretical, it's about actively engaging in a journey of self-improvement as a learner.
Precisely. And the paper highlights that just knowing about a strategy isn't enough for it to become a regular part of your learning toolkit. You need to deeply understand when it's most useful, why it works, and how to use it effectively in your own context.
Right. The when, why, and how.
Exactly. They refer to this as metacognitive acquisition procedures, or MAPS, building on the research of Presley and colleagues. Think of MAPS as a deliberate process. First, you notice different learning strategies, then you actively try them out, analyzing how well they work for you compared to your old methods.
Okay.
And finally, you solidify the ones that are most effective into your learning toolkit. It's about consciously building your repertoire of effective learning techniques.
Okay, so we're talking about more than just surface-level study tips here. We're getting into the core of how you approach learning itself. Now, the paper mentions 4 key categories of SRL strategies. What are those?
Right. The authors describe self-regulated learning as a fusion of skill and will, referencing Garcia and Pintrich. Skill refers to the actual learning strategies you employ, and will encompasses your motivation and goals.
Skill and will. Got it.
These two elements come together in 4 main categories: motivational strategies, cognitive strategies, metacognitive strategies, and volitional strategies.
Okay, let's break down each of those, starting with motivational strategies. What's the essence of that category?
Motivational strategies are basically what ignite your learning and keep you focused on your objectives. They involve influencing your belief in your ability to succeed your self-efficacy,
Yeah.
how much you value the learning task, the goals you set for yourself, and how you explain your successes and setbacks your attributions.
Okay.
Self-regulated learners tend to have a strong sense of self-efficacy. They genuinely want to master the material, they set challenging yet achievable goals, and crucially, they attribute their successes to their own effort and their failures to things they can change, like their strategies.
Right, not just I'm bad at this.
Exactly. The course actively guides students in evaluating and cultivating these motivational qualities. So the key insight here for you, the listener, is to actively cultivate a belief in your ability to learn and connect with why the material matters to you personally.
So it's about nurturing the right mindset for effective learning. What about cognitive strategies? That sounds more like the traditional study skills we often hear about.
You're right. Cognitive strategies are often what come to mind when we think of study skills, things like note-taking, summarizing, self-testing. However, the paper emphasizes using more effective methods that have been refined through decades of research, citing Weinstein and Mayer.
So not just any old note-taking.
Right. For example, strategies that help you identify the underlying structure of a text, or techniques for generating effective self-questions, as Rosenshine and others investigated. The critical distinction they draw is between deep processing,
Mm.
where you're actively trying to understand the material and connect it to your existing knowledge, and surface processing, which is more about rote memorization.
Okay. Deep versus surface.
Exactly. Self-regulated learners are much more likely to engage in deep processing. The course focuses on informing students about these powerful cognitive strategies and providing ample opportunities to practice them.
Deep processing versus surface processing, that's a really helpful way to think about it. Now, metacognitive strategies. That always sounds like a very academic term. Can you break that down in a relatable way?
Sure. Think of it like this. Metacognition is your ability to be aware of your own thinking and to control it effectively. As Garner described it, it's knowledge about and regulation of your cognitive processes.
Okay.
This includes understanding your strengths and weaknesses as a learner, recognizing the demands of different learning tasks, and knowing when, why, and how to use specific cognitive strategies.
The when, why, how again.
Yes. Self-regulated learners plan their learning more deliberately, they monitor their understanding as they go, and they evaluate their progress more frequently, as Zimmerman and Martinez-Pons discovered. It's like a pilot checking their instruments before and during a flight to make sure everything is on course.
I like that analogy.
Yeah. That example in the paper of a student using a mnemonic to remember the steps in a science experiment, that's a clear example of metacognitive awareness in selecting and applying a strategy. The course places a strong emphasis on developing this metacognitive awareness and integrating it into the learning process. So it's not just about having the learning tools, it's about knowing which tool to use, when to use it, and how to use it effectively to achieve your learning goals.
That pilot analogy makes metacognition much clearer. So it's about being the conscious director of your own learning. Finally, we have volitional strategies. What role do they play?
Volitional strategies are your go-to techniques for protecting your learning time and effort from distractions and competing priorities. Kuhl and Kroska suggest they're similar to metacognitive strategies in that they involve a form of self-control, but instead of acting on your cognitive processes, they work on your motivation.
Okay, so protecting motivation.
Exactly. These are the strategies you use to avoid obstacles to learning, eliminate them if they appear, overcome distractions, and even find alternative ways to learn if your initial approach isn't working. The example of deciding not to study in a noisy dorm room at 7 p.m. is a perfect illustration.
Yeah, good call.
Right. The course aims to equip students with these volitional strategies and also teach them how to help their future students develop this crucial aspect of self-regulation. It's about taking proactive steps to create an environment and a mindset that supports focused learning and perseverance.
So it's about actively managing your environment and your own willpower, really, to stay on track with your learning goals. Now, to make all of this work in practice, the paper emphasizes the importance of feedback and talks about the processes of SRL. How do those pieces fit together?
Yeah, that feedback loop is critical.
Mm-hmm.
The paper highlights 3 interconnected processes for effectively using feedback to drive self-regulation, drawing on the influential work of Bandura: self-observation, self-evaluation, and self-reaction.
Observation, evaluation, reaction. Okay.
These 3 processes form a crucial cycle for continuous learning and improvement.
Let's delve into each of those. Self-observation, what does that entail?
Self-observation is about intentionally paying attention to your own behavior and the situations that influence your learning. It serves 2 important functions. Self-diagnosis, helping you understand how your environment and your thoughts impact your learning.
Right.
And self-motivation, because simply observing your behavior can prompt you to evaluate it. The procrastination example from the paper is very illustrative here. By systematically tracking their time and how they were spending it, students could identify patterns of procrastination they might not have been consciously aware of before.
Ah, like data collection on yourself.
Exactly. It's like collecting data on your own learning habits to see where you might be going off course.
So it's about becoming a more objective observer of your own learning process. What's the next step then? Self-evaluation.
The next step is self-evaluation. Yes, this involves judging your progress and performance based on your learning goals and standards, and then analyzing the reasons behind your successes or failures. Self-regulated learners, as we said, tend to attribute their outcomes to factors they have some control over, like their effort and the strategies they use.
Right, the controllable stuff.
Yeah, the paper stresses the importance of evaluating not just your performance on tests, but also your learning behaviors and the effectiveness of the strategies you're employing. Instead of just asking why you made a mistake, which can often lead to blaming external factors, the paper recommends asking what, when, and how questions. These types of questions are more likely to lead to concrete actions for improvement. That daydreaming example we touched on earlier fits here, focusing on the specific behavior of daydreaming. What was I thinking about? When did it start? And how to manage it, rather than just wondering, why do I daydream?
That makes perfect sense. It's about focusing on actionable insights rather than just assigning blame or getting stuck. And the final part of this feedback loop is self-reaction.
Exactly. Self-reaction refers to the feelings of satisfaction or dissatisfaction, and the sense of self-efficacy or inadequacy that arise from your self-evaluation. For positive change to occur, dissatisfaction with poor performance should motivate you to take corrective action.
So use that feeling.
Right. The key is to develop the understanding that effective strategy use leads to better learning outcomes, and ineffective use leads to poorer results. So if you don't do well on a test, that feeling of dissatisfaction should prompt you to identify what went wrong with your learning strategies and experiment with different approaches. It's about using your emotional response as a catalyst for improvement, not just feeling bad.
So it's a continuous cycle then, observing your learning, evaluating your progress and why, and then reacting and adjusting your approach based on that feedback. Okay, now the paper gives some specific examples of the activities used in this SRL-focused course. What were some of the key ones?
Yeah, there were several really insightful activities designed to foster this kind of self-reflection and strategic learning. One was having students keep a learning journal for 2 weeks, where they recorded their study habits.
Okay, like a diary?
Sort of, yeah. This provided them with raw data to evaluate their performance, reflect on what was working and what wasn't, plan specific changes to unproductive behaviors, and then actively try to implement those changes. It's a direct application of that observe, evaluate, react cycle we just discussed.
That sounds like a powerful way to make the abstract concept of learning more concrete and personal. What other activities did they use?
They also utilized topic-specific questionnaires drawn from educational psychology research. The idea here was to focus students' attention on concrete examples of the course concepts and help them pinpoint their own strengths and weaknesses in different areas of self-regulated learning.
Interesting.
Yeah, the appendix of the paper actually includes a sample questionnaire based on the work of Nichols and colleagues on achievement goals. It asks students to reflect on when they feel most successful in school, with questions related to things like, avoiding work, outperforming others, or truly understanding the material.
Right, different motivations.
Yeah, exactly. Students would then score their responses and reflect on what each factor reveals about their own learning orientation in relation to SRL principles.
That's fascinating, using established research tools for personal self-assessment. What did the students do with the results of these questionnaires then?
They wrote reaction papers. In the first part, they were asked to step into the role of a psychologist and analyze their own questionnaire results, explaining what those results suggested about them as a self-regulated learner.
Putting on a different hat?
Yeah, encourage them to actively engage with the course concepts and apply them to themselves. Then, in the second part, they evaluated the accuracy of that psychological analysis using evidence from their learning journals as supporting or contradictory information. This process of comparing their own perceptions and strategies with more effective, research-backed approaches was crucial for personalizing the knowledge and identifying areas for growth.
So it wasn't just about passively filling out a form, it was about deep critical analysis and connecting it directly to their own lived experiences as learners. Were there other activities that promoted this kind of reflection?
Yes, definitely. They also incorporated group reflection activities. Whenever a new learning strategy was introduced in class, students would break into small groups to discuss how they could specifically apply that strategy to a current assignment in the course.
Ah, practical application.
Right. This peer feedback, combined with the instructor's guidance during the larger class discussion, provided multiple perspectives and deepened their understanding of how to put the strategy into practice. And then, after the first major test, they implemented a really detailed error analysis activity.
Error analysis. That sounds like going far beyond simply looking at which questions you got wrong.
Oh, exactly. Way beyond. They used a three-dimensional system. First, students conducted a test question analysis, identifying the original source of the information for each question they missed. Was it from the textbook, a lecture, a specific reading?
Pinpointing the source.
Yeah. And also the type of knowledge being assessed. Was it factual recall, conceptual understanding, or a procedural skill? This helped them gain insights into their listening and reading comprehension and the types of knowledge they were struggling with.
Okay, that's dimension one. What else?
Second was an information processing analysis. Here, they carefully evaluated their marking and note-taking strategies and their review methods in relation to the questions they had missed. Often, they discovered issues like incomplete notes, disorganized information, or review strategies that weren't aligned with the type of knowledge being tested.
Ah, checking their process.
Exactly. And finally, they conducted a self-regulation analysis, using checklists to evaluate their control over factors like time management, motivation, volition, and their information processing during the test itself.
Wow.
Based on this very thorough analysis, they were then required to generate a detailed study plan to address their identified weaknesses, directly applying the principles and strategies they were learning in the course. This multifaceted approach not only benefited their own learning, but also provided valuable experience for their future roles as educators, showing them how to diagnose learning issues.
Wow, that's a really comprehensive and proactive way to learn from mistakes, much more constructive than just feeling bad about a grade. Now, the paper also delves into the concept of teaching strategy orchestration. What exactly does that involve?
Strategy orchestration.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the sophisticated ability to select the most appropriate learning strategies for a given task, to allocate your time and effort effectively, and to maintain the necessary motivation and focus to achieve your learning goals.
So it's not just knowing the strategies.
Right. It's not enough to just know a collection of strategies.
Right.
You need to know when to use each one, why it's the right choice for this situation, and how to combine different strategies effectively. The paper emphasizes that poor orchestration can lead to learning failure even if you have a good understanding of individual strategies.
Okay.
You might struggle with managing your motivation, lack awareness of certain crucial strategies, or just be unable to integrate them in a productive way. It's like having a talented group of musicians, but a conductor who can't blend them together to create a harmonious performance.
That's a great analogy. So it's about knowing how to conduct your own learning orchestra. How did this course go about teaching this complex skill of strategy orchestration?
They employed a three-phase system. First, they provided the essential theoretical background and relevant research for each learning strategy, the why it works.
Okay, the foundation.
Second, they focused on contextualization, where students were guided to identify potential factors that could interfere with the effective use of a strategy, such as their own personal attitudes or habits, maybe procrastination tendencies, as well as any prerequisite skills that needed to be in place.
Recognizing the roadblocks.
Exactly. And third was the actual strategy training itself, which involved providing opportunities for practice on authentic learning tasks and giving students meaningful feedback on their implementation. This entire approach continually reinforced that self-observation, self-evaluation, and self-reaction model, encouraging students to become informed and adaptable strategy users.
Can you give us a concrete example of how this three-phase system might have worked in the classroom? Maybe with that daydreaming example.
Yeah, certainly. Let's say they were teaching students about the importance of understanding text processing patterns and using effective marking techniques while reading. They would start phase one by explaining the research behind how our brains process text and the benefits of active reading strategies.
Got it. Theory first.
Then, in the contextualization phase, phase two, they might lead a class discussion about common challenges students face when trying to mark effectively, maybe feeling overwhelmed, not knowing what to highlight, or, yes, getting distracted. And that's where the daydreaming insight came in.
Right.
They asked students to think about when they typically started to daydream or lose focus while reading. And most students, interestingly, reported it happening around page 4 or 5, and almost none of them had been consciously aware of this pattern before.
Huh. That's specific.
Yeah. This helped them connect the act of daydreaming to less effective self-management and information processing, and how it would directly interfere with effective marking a contextual roadblock. Finally, phase 3, the strategy training. They would break into smaller groups to brainstorm realistic alternative strategies for staying focused and marking effectively, things like studying at different times, reading in shorter chunks, using specific annotation symbols, maybe taking brief breaks after 3 pages.
Practical solutions.
Right. This small exercise was powerful because it increased their awareness of a previously unconscious, unproductive habit, daydreaming at page 4, and empowered them to develop concrete solutions. It linked the theory to their reality and gave them tools.
That's a really insightful example of connecting the theoretical to the very practical challenges of learning. The paper also places significant emphasis on note-taking strategies, particularly the use of graphic organizers. Why were these considered so central to self-regulated learning?
Well, graphic organizer notes, like conceptual maps and matrices, are incredibly valuable tools for representing information in a structured and visual format. Conceptual maps are excellent for showing hierarchical relationships between ideas.
Like a tree diagram.
Sort of, yeah. And matrices use rows and columns to effectively organize supporting details and comparisons. The course also encouraged the use of note cards to explicitly connect different concepts. Their approach was based on a variation of Mayer's select, organize, and integrate model,
Okay.
emphasizing that note-taking is not just about passively recording information. It actively enhances selective attention as you decide what to write down, deepens your understanding of the organizational structure of the material, and fosters awareness of potential connections between different ideas. And, of course, well-crafted notes then serve as a powerful foundation for effective review and later recall.
So it's an active process that enhances understanding at multiple levels, not just transcription. How are these matrix systems specifically used within the course?
In a variety of ways, actually. They were used by the instructors to outline the structure of each unit of study, to guide the construction of their own tests, and to present complex information clearly during class sessions.
So modeling its use.
Exactly. And importantly, they explicitly explained to the students why, when, and how they were using the matrix system in their teaching materials, making the pedagogical choices transparent.
Okay.
They also had students actively create their own conceptual maps and matrices to process information, generate potential test questions, and guide their own elaborations of the material. And as we discussed during error analysis, the use of the matrix system as a framework for analyzing patterns of mistakes on tests.
Right, the error analysis framework.
Yeah. The paper provides a specific example of a matrix comparing, say, learning goals versus performance goals across different beliefs and behaviors. Mastering the matrix system involved developing 3 key skills: constructing the overall structure, effectively recording relevant supporting details within it, and generating thoughtful review questions, especially those that highlighted connections between related pieces of information, like comparing items in the same row or column.
That sounds like a very active and engaging way to process and synthesize information, much more than just linear notes. What about the technique of guided peer questioning? How did that contribute to self-regulated learning?
Guided peer questioning is a collaborative learning strategy where students use generic question stems provided by researchers like King to create their own questions about assigned readings or lecture content.
Question stems, like sentence starters.
Exactly, like how does X relate to Y, or what is the main idea of? They were specifically taught the difference between descriptive questions, which primarily focus on recalling facts, what is, and explanatory questions, which delve deeper into understanding how or why things occur. Why does, how would.
Promoting deeper thinking.
Precisely. The emphasis was on developing those higher-level explanatory questions. Students would generate these questions outside of class and then come together in small groups to discuss them, taking turns asking and answering each other's questions. Research, particularly by King, has consistently shown that training students in strategic questioning significantly enhances their learning and retention.
Makes sense. You have to understand it to ask a good why question.
Right. The underlying principle here is that a deeper understanding of how to orchestrate learning strategies, including how to ask effective questions, leads to more flexible strategy use and ultimately better information retention. It empowers students to take more ownership of their learning process.
So by teaching them how to ask insightful questions, they were essentially equipping them with a powerful tool for deeper understanding and self-directed learning. The course also put a strong emphasis on modeling effective strategy instruction for these future teachers. How was that implemented?
Yeah, that was crucial. Because a core aim of the course was to prepare students to teach SRL strategies themselves, the instructors consciously modeled a variety of instructional methods that are known to support self-regulated learning. This included direct teaching, of course, but also collaborative learning activities. The instructors themselves explicitly demonstrating effective learning strategies, watch how I do this, and the use of scripted learning strategies.
Scripted strategies, what are those?
They're adapted from techniques like reciprocal teaching. They provide students with structured questions and guidelines to support their learning during a task, like reading comprehension, kind of like training wheels for strategy.
Okay, got it.
And strategy training wasn't a separate module. It was seamlessly integrated throughout the entire course. Instructors consistently explained when, why, and how they were using particular approaches. They would explicitly state the rationale behind their instructional choices and often contrast the chosen strategy with alternative methods.
Making their thinking visible.
Exactly. They also frequently modeled the strategies in action, thinking aloud as they demonstrated how to implement them. For example, when introducing the matrix note-taking system, they might contrast two hypothetical students reviewing their notes. Student A, who simply jotted down phrases, and student B, who used complete sentences and elaborated on connections.
Ah, showing the difference in quality.
Right. This subtle comparison would highlight how even small variations in implementation can significantly impact the cognitive demands during review and ultimately the depth of understanding. It's all about showing them not just what to do, but also how to effectively teach those skills to others, considering potential student variations.
That makes perfect sense, showing them by doing and explicitly highlighting the pedagogical reasoning behind each choice. Very meta. Finally, how did the instructors go about evaluating the effectiveness of both the students' own self-regulation skills and their own instructional methods?
They employed a multifaceted evaluation approach. They would regularly ask students specific questions about the new learning strategies they were being taught. Did they find them valuable? Did they understand how to use them? Were they actually implementing them in their own studies? What challenges were they encountering? How were they adapting the strategies?
Checking in frequently?
Yes. And crucially, they would ask students to reflect on how they might go about teaching these same strategies to their future students. Importantly, they took student feedback on their own instructional practices very seriously.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Even if a particular teaching method appeared to be effective in terms of student performance, if the students themselves didn't understand why it was effective or weren't comfortable using it as future teachers, the instructors were willing to adapt their approach. For example, they mentioned modifying small group work to include bonus points if all members met a criterion score, responding to student concerns about group dynamics.
So student buy-in was key for future use.
Definitely. They even incorporated small classroom experiments to directly assess the effectiveness of different teaching strategies, which also served as a model of action research for the students. But the paper strongly emphasizes that for a truly significant and lasting impact, the principles of SRL need to be integrated across the entire teacher preparation program, not just confined to a single course.
Right, one course isn't enough.
Exactly. Developing self-regulation is a long-term process, deeply influenced by pre-existing beliefs and attitudes. So a single course, while valuable, is really just the beginning. The ultimate goal was to initiate this process and advocate for the broader adoption of these practices throughout the entire program.
So the fundamental shift in this educational psychology course was moving beyond simply delivering content to actively cultivating self-regulated learners who are then equipped to empower their own future students with these vital skills.
Exactly. That was the core transformation. The author stressed the conceptual change that often needs to occur for students who enter the course with established, but perhaps less effective, beliefs about learning.
Changing minds about learning itself.
Right. They found that directly teaching productive learning strategies is crucial because students are more likely to value and consistently use strategies they personally find effective, which in turn leads to a deeper appreciation and understanding of the underlying psychological principles. This aims for what they call conditionalized knowledge, knowledge that is not just memorized, but is readily accessible and applicable in relevant future situations.
Knowledge you know when and how to use.
Precisely. While their initial evaluations of the course were primarily informal and positive, they had plans for more rigorous assessments of the different course components and the long-term impact on their students' learning strategies after they completed the program.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the principles of self-regulated learning and how this research from, well, back in 1997 approached teaching it. It's clear that this is far more than just a collection of study tips. It's a foundational approach to becoming a lifelong effective learner.
Absolutely. It's really about empowering yourself to take control of your own learning journey, no matter what you're trying to master. It's a fundamental skill.
So for you, our listener, as you reflect on our conversation today, maybe consider one or two of your current study or learning habits. Based on what you've learned about self-regulation, the observation, the evaluation, the reaction, the strategies, what's one small, concrete change you could experiment with to become a more effective learner?
Yeah, just one small thing.
It might be as simple as trying a new note-taking technique, like a matrix, or being more mindful of your study environment, maybe turning off notifications, or setting more specific process-oriented learning goals instead of just outcome goals. Give it a try, observe what happens, evaluate its effectiveness for you, and adjust accordingly. That's self-regulation in action, right? And it's a journey that can truly transform how you learn.